quantity is the power of a highly developed culture. This is because the power of culture brings happiness and meaning to our lives, and, by extension, to the lives of others. My wish, culture of peace. 150th anniversary of the birth of Kim Koo.
President Jae-myung says South Korea must seize the opportunity created by its semiconductor boom to prepare for the next generation of growth beyond AI, highlighting 7 advanced technologies key to the nation's future economy. North Korea launched another ballistic missile toward the East Sea on Wednesday. It's a second in less than a week, and what appears to be a show of defiance ahead of upcoming South Korea-U.S. military drills. Rescue teams are racing against time in Western Colombia, combing through the wreckage for signs of life after a devastating earthquake left more than 250 people dead and many others trapped beneath collapsed buildings. Korea has been stepping up efforts to stay ahead in the global race for AI and semiconductors. And President Jae-myung is looking further ahead, today unveiling 7 cutting-edge fields that the government sees as the country's next engines of growth. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yujin starts us off.
Korea is already betting big on AI and semiconductors. But President Lee Jae-myung says the country needs to look beyond today's growth engines to technologies that could shape its economy decades from now.
최근 주목받고 있는 첨단 기술의 공통적인 특징은 기술 교체 주기가 무척 빠르다는 점, 인공지능 시대 그 다음에 먹거리를 우리가 미리 준비해야 합니다.
Chairing a meeting on Korea's long-term growth strategy on Wednesday, Lee unveiled what the government calls the SEED initiative. Short for Strategic Emerging Engines for Disruptive Innovation, it focuses on 7 fields spanning 3 broad areas: clean energy, frontier technology, and supply chain resilience.
오늘 우리가 뿌린 첨단 기술 씨앗들이 미래에는 거대한 나무로 자라나서 새로운 메가 프로젝트로 자라나게 될 것으로 믿습니다.
Among the goals are commercializing Korea's light water small modular reactor technology by 2035, landing a domestically developed spacecraft on the moon by 2030, and building a homegrown quantum computer by 2029. Korea is hardly alone in looking this far ahead. Both the United States and China have already made fields such as quantum computing and nuclear fusion national strategic priorities. But Seoul's push has an economic security dimension as well. While Korea is a manufacturing powerhouse in sectors such as semiconductors and electric vehicles, many of the materials, parts, and equipment underpinning those industries still come from abroad.
Korea accounts for just 2.3% of the semiconductor equipment market and 3% of the anode materials market for secondary batteries. In particular, 99% of the heavy rare earths used in permanent magnets, which are essential for robotics, are imported.
To reduce that vulnerability, the government plans to expand domestic refining and processing capacity, recycle critical minerals, including rare earths, and reduce reliance on any single supplier. The Lee administration says it will support the 7 initiatives with sustained funding and regulatory reforms while continuing to identify promising fields that could power the country's economy in the decades ahead. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has been presented with the credentials from the new U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Michelle Seoul. He met the new American diplomat at the Blue House on Wednesday and had brief talks. Seoul said she would make greater efforts in promoting friendly cooperation between Korea and the U.S. And President Lee said he hoped the new ambassador could act as a bridge between the two countries to bolster the alliance and resolve pending issues. President Lee also received the diplomatic credentials from the new ambassadors from Portugal, the United Arab Emirates, and Ireland. Overall jobs in Korea continue to grow for a second consecutive month. Yet the picture remains gloomy for young people, with the youth unemployment rates seeing its biggest rise in 5 years. Kim Jun-hong reports.
Korea recorded its biggest job gain in 4 months, adding more than 100,000 jobs in July. The Ministry of Data and Statistics said on Wednesday that the number of employed people reached 29.13 million, up 108,000 from a year earlier. Job gains continued for a second month following a 40,000 decline in May. Despite this, the total employment rate declined for a 4th consecutive month. Among those employed, health and social welfare services saw the biggest job gains, while manufacturing and construction continued to lose workers. Manufacturing jobs fell by 68,000, extending its decline to 25 months. Despite the rebound in overall job growth, employment conditions for young people worsened. Among the 15 to 29 age group, the number of employed people continued its 45-month streak of decline, dropping by 191,000. Their unemployment rate rose 1.3 percentage points to 6.8%, marking the sharpest increase in more than 5 years. The ministry pointed to persistent challenges facing young job seekers.
Korea's hiring practices have shifted toward year-round and experienced hires. This appears to be making it more challenging for young people to find jobs than in the past.
Asked why strong semiconductor-led exports have not led to better youth employment, the ministry cited the chip industry's limited job creation.
The semiconductor industry has a relatively limited impact on job creation. Since it relies heavily on large-scale investment in facilities and equipment, it contributes significantly to exports but does not generate as many jobs.
The finance ministry said it will step up efforts to keep job growth on track. The government plans to unveil a joint plan to improve employment conditions for young people. It also said a dedicated jobs task force will develop measures for struggling sectors, including manufacturing and construction. Kim Jun-hong, Arirang News.
Asiana Airlines shareholders have approved a mega merger with Korean Air, paving the way for the launch of an integrated carrier on December 17th. Our Baek Ju-hee has the details.
The Asiana-Korean Air merger is close to being official. According to Asiana Airlines on Wednesday, following an extraordinary meeting in Seoul, around 99% of voting shareholders approved the integration with Korean Air. CEO of Asiana Airlines Song Bo-young described the decision as the first step toward writing a new chapter in South Korea's aviation history as a mega carrier. After closing the final meeting in Asiana's 38-year history, CEO Song added that all employees will unite to ensure a smooth transition and a meaningful conclusion to Asiana's journey. This decision brings to a close a complex integration process that began in November 2020. Since filing for merger approvals across 14 jurisdictions in January 2021, Korean Air has cleared all antitrust hurdles. After meeting key conditions, it acquired a 63.88% stake in December 2024, taking Asiana as a subsidiary. Throughout 2025, the carrier fulfilled certain requirements, selling Asiana's cargo division and relocating passenger operations to Incheon Airport's Terminal 2. With final shareholder approval secured this August, Asiana Airlines will officially dissolve on December 17th as all assets and liabilities are fully transferred to Korean Air. However, critical administrative tasks remain before the giant carrier is ready for takeoff. The highly anticipated integration of both airlines' mileage programs is still awaiting final approval from Korea's Fair Trade Commission. Also, harmonizing pilot seniority lists remains a sensitive challenge given their different recruitment standards and flight hour requirements. The success of this merger will ultimately depend on how seamlessly Korean Air resolves these operational hurdles while enhancing service quality and passenger convenience. 백주희, Arirang News.
North Korea has fired another ballistic missile, its second launch in less than a week. While the exact type of missile remains unclear, experts say the latest launch could offer clues into Pyongyang's advancing missile capabilities and the message it's trying to send. For more, we have our defense correspondent Park Konu in the studio. Welcome, Konu.
Thanks for having me.
Konu, let's start with the ballistic missile itself. Could you explain what happened earlier today?
Yes, of course. So North Korea this morning launched a ballistic missile from the coastal areas of Wonsan toward the East Sea at around 6 a.m. And today's launch came just 6 days after Pyongyang fired a short-range ballistic missile on August 6th, marking its 11th such launch this year. And according to Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff, the missile flew over 700 kilometers with South Korean and U.S. intelligence authorities tracking and sharing information from the early stages. While missiles with a range of 300 to 1,000 kilometers are typically classified as short range, it's notable that JCS didn't identify Wednesday's missile as a short-range ballistic missile.
Then, Konu, does that mean it may not have been a short-range ballistic missile?
Possibly. And that's where things get interesting. And one possibility is that North Korea may have shortened the flight range of an intermediate-range ballistic missile for the test. And one expert I spoke to says the flight characteristics point to the possibility of a hypersonic weapon.
There's a strong possibility a hypersonic ballistic missile was fired. Or it could also be a hypersonic intermediate-range missile. The missile appears to have shown a similar flight distance and warhead trajectory as the one launched on January 4th. This could have been a test aimed at improving its hypersonic capabilities.
The same expert also sees today's launch and the one on August 6th as part of a step-by-step testing process aimed at improving the weapon's performance. Other experts see a possible link to the war in Ukraine.
North Korean missiles are already being used on the battlefield. The latest launch could be aimed at meeting Russia's demands by testing new missiles, improving shortcomings in existing systems, and demonstrating enhanced capabilities.
Now, Konu, we also saw pictures apparently showing the missile from South Korea. That's highly unusual, isn't it?
That's right. The missile was apparently visible for some residents in Gyeongsangnam-do County in Gyeongsangnam-do Province near the launch site, which experts say is quite unusual, as it's not common for people to visually observe a North Korean missile in flight.
It's normally difficult to visually observe a North Korean missile from South Korea. This could also suggest that North Korea was testing a missile with different flight characteristics.
Following Wednesday's launch, the National Security Office convened an emergency security meeting, also joined by officials from the JCS, to assess the situation and review response measures. It also condemned the North's repeated launches as a violation of UN Security Council resolutions and urged Pyongyang to immediately halt further provocations. The JCS said the military maintains the capabilities and readiness to respond overwhelmingly to any provocation under a robust combined defense posture.
Now, Konu, I do have to mention the missile launch comes just days before South Korea-U.S. Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise begins next Monday. What can we expect from this year's drills?
Yeah, so the Ulchi Freedom Shield is expected to take place from the 17th, which is next Monday, through the 27th. And some 18,000 South Korean troops are expected to take part, with officials saying the scale is similar to previous years. The United Nations Command will also participate with around 70 personnel from 12 member states, including South Korea and the U.S. While Seoul and Washington maintain that the exercise is defensive in nature, officials say this year's will focus on responding to evolving threats, including those from North Korea.
Involving aspects of warfare, including drones, GPS disruption, cyber attacks, are expected to be reflected in the exercise Space Forces Korea's. What I will also say is DPRK soldiers have deployed and fought in Ukraine, and they've taken those lessons they learned there and brought them back to North Korea. That changes the DPR capability, and our training accounts for that threat.
Alrighty, Konu, thank you for that report.
My pleasure.
After the powerful quake struck western Colombia, killing at least 250 people, rescue efforts are continuing against the clock, hoping for more survivors to return home. Our Kim Bo-kyung has this report.
People rejoice as a woman identified as Daniela Largo Sanchez was rescued after spending 36 hours trapped under rubble. Her rescue came on Tuesday night with the help of the Pereira Fire Department and Special Operations Unit for Emergencies and Disasters, according to the Bogota Fire Department. Crowds also erupted in cheers on the same day after rescue crews pulled a kitten out of a collapsed building in the quake-hit Pereira, Colombia. Rescue teams and volunteers are working against the clock to find survivors from the area hit by the 7.4 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful earthquake to strike the South American country in decades.
3 people have been rescued here, and 2 more over there. Thank God they're unharmed, not too badly injured. Everything's going well, thanks to all of us.
By Tuesday afternoon, Reuters reported at least 250 people dead nationwide, with cities reporting their own figures of 95 in Cali, 101 in Pereira, and 13 in the rural Choco department nearest the epicenter. However, Colombian President Abelardo de la Espriella said the earthquake killed at least 181 people and left 2,595 more injured. He added that at least 195 remained missing, but civilian-run databases suggest the number could be closer to 4,000. Countries around the world are extending a helping hand to Colombia.
We send all our solidarity to the Colombians, to President Abelardo de la Espriella, and to his government. But in addition to this solidarity, we have decided with the Prime Minister and the Cabinet to send, in this first shipment, 12 tons of humanitarian aid.
South Korea also pledged on Wednesday to provide $1 million worth of humanitarian aid to Colombia to help the country recover. Seoul's foreign ministry said that it hopes the aid, which will be delivered through an international organization operating in Colombia, will help recovery efforts and ensure a swift return to normalcy for its people. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In the meantime, tensions between the U.S. and Iran are spiraling again after new attacks on commercial ships near the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea threaten to derail fragile ceasefire talks. Kim So-young has more.
2 attacks, roughly 1,000 miles apart, but tied to the same conflict. The U.S. Central Command said Tuesday that in the Strait of Hormuz, a Navy helicopter fired 2 missiles at a Panama-flagged tanker, the Villanova, disabling its steering after the crew ignored warnings and tried to go through the American blockade on Iranian ports. All 17 crew members on board are reported to be safe. Hours later, at the Red Sea's Bab el-Mandeb Strait, Iran-backed Houthi rebels fired ballistic missiles at a small Egyptian-owned cargo ship. 6 people were killed, the first death from a Houthi attack on shipping since the war began in February. The violence rattled energy markets. Brent crude jumped more than 1% to settle near $89 a barrel as traders weighed the growing risk to 2 of the world's most vital oil corridors. Still, there were flickers of diplomacy. Pakistan's defense minister told Bloomberg that the U.S. and Iran appeared close to, quote, some sort of arrangement, and Iranian officials confirmed a Pakistan envoy was headed to Tehran for talks. But the rhetoric on both sides tells a different story. President Trump, in an interview with Real America's Voice, made clear he's keeping every option open. He said the United States controls their money and that he's their banker, referring to frozen Iranian assets. Another option Trump mentioned would be to hit them really, really hard. In Tehran, hardliner Mohsen Razai, who now heads Iran's Supreme National Security Council, fired back, telling China's ambassador the U.S. is the source of insecurity in the Gulf. He warned that the Strait of Hormuz will not open until the United States changes its behavior and accepts Iran's conditions, demanding an end to naval blockade, the release of frozen Iranian assets, and a halt to fighting across the region. Kim So-young, Arirang News.
A severe drought in Gyeongsangnam-do Province in the country has prompted a nationwide emergency response. 200 water tankers and around 400 firefighters have been deployed to supply water to drought-hit communities and farms. Jung Hae-rim tells us more.
South Korea has mobilized firefighting resources from across the country to help tackle a severe drought in Gyeongsangnam-do Province. A national firefighting mobilization order was issued Tuesday evening, sending 200 water tankers and around 400 firefighters from 16 regional fire headquarters to drought-hit areas. The vehicles began their arrival on Wednesday morning and are being deployed across the province. The drought follows an unusually dry monsoon season and weeks of intense heat. As of Wednesday, the average water reserve rate at Gyeongsangnam-do Province stood at just over 33%, less than half the seasonal average. In Arirang, one of the hardest hit areas, the figure has fallen to around 26% and has received the largest deployment of assistance, with 40 water tankers sent to supply agricultural and household water. According to the Agricultural Drought Management System, drought alerts are now in place in 17 of the province's 18 cities and counties, with Arirang, Gyeongsangnam, and Haman under the critical alert, the highest level. Officials say more than 2,100 hectares of farmland have already suffered drought damage. Some communities without access to regional water networks are also facing restricted supplies, relying on water trucks and bottled water. The mobilized fire crews will continue delivering water through Thursday. This marks the second time South Korea has issued a national firefighting mobilization order in response to drought, following a similar operation in Gangneung last year. Jung Hae-rim, Arirang News.
A simple shower may be part of everyday life for most, but for those experiencing homelessness, it can be a luxury. However, one government program is working to make showers more accessible. Our Shin So-won has the story.
In Pampo, amid the blend of old and new buildings that presents the evolving identity of Central Seoul, a city government-led initiative has become an oasis for the homeless. In the scorching summer heat, free mobile shower units provided by the Seoul Metropolitan Government, each carrying around 600 liters of water and serving roughly 20 people a day, have become a welcome source of relief. More than just a shower, the 다시서기 service offers welfare support, including new clothes, toiletries, and food at least 2 times a week.
For them, taking a shower is about more than just personal hygiene. It also helps them feel comfortable being in public spaces and gives them a sense that they can be part of the community alongside others.
According to Seoul officials, 1,577 people used the city's mobile shower services between May and the end of July this year, up more than 30% from the same period last year. At the 5 locations currently operating across Seoul, visitors appear a little shy at first, but there's also a visible sense of anticipation.
These days, going to a public bath or sauna can cost around 15,000 won, and that's not something we can easily afford. So I'm very grateful to the staff who come here and give us a place to shower for free.
Outside the shower booth, face-to-face interaction with social workers also helps visitors.
Even when the free shower service isn't operating, the social workers still come by to check on us, ask if we're having any difficulties or need anything, and provide as much support as they can.
What begins as a simple conversation can give a helping hand towards finding new opportunities in life and even employment. A simple shower can become a first point of connection, helping them identify what support they need. In that sense, mobile shower serves as a starting point towards greater independence. Shin So-won, Arirang News.
These days, it feels so cool and crisp in the mornings and evenings that you might even wonder if fall is already on its way. The heat has eased a bit, but we're still seeing plenty of sunshine and sizzling heat across the western parts of the country during the day. Tomorrow, Seoul and Jeonju will both reach 33 degrees Celsius. The East Coast will be a different story, though. Clouds and rain will move in with the easterly winds, keeping Gangneung at around 27 degrees. Through Friday, Gangwon-do Province and the east coast of Gyeongsangnam-do Province will receive 20 to 60 millimeters of rain. And some much-needed rain is also on the way for Busan, Ulsan, and Gyeongsangnam-do Province, where 10 to 40 millimeters of rain could fall from tomorrow. As for temperatures, Seoul will start the day at 23 degrees Celsius, Daejeon 21 and Jeju 24 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 33 degrees, Daegu 34 degrees, and Busan 31 degrees. Looking ahead to Monday, the substitute holiday, rain will spread across the country. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
For thousands of years, one breath has endured. More than a martial art, it is the Korean way of life. Taekwondo, connecting the world. Smarter than ever, Taekwondo leaps toward a new future, connecting the world through a single movement. The spirit of Korea meets the boundless energy of K-pop. No longer just a sport, Taekwondo is at the heart of K-culture, bringing Korea's spirit to the world. A beautiful culture, connecting heart to heart. We now strive to safeguard Taekwondo's community training culture as a treasured heritage for all humanity. The pride of Korea, Taekwondo.
Time to set the facts straight. Get Korea right. K-culture is sweeping the globe. K-pop, K-drama, K-movie, K-food, and even K-beauty. Korean cultural content is gaining more and more fans worldwide. It's indeed the golden age of K-culture. But with this growing interest comes an increase in misinformation about Korea. There's so much inaccurate information out there. Even AI can sometimes get it wrong. So, we must set things straight and correct all the misinformation. So here's the plan. The Voluntary Agency Network of Korea, VANK, and Arirang TV present the Get Korea Right project. Our goal is to provide accurate information on important keywords that come to mind when we think of Korea. Blatant errors and false claims that distort history. It's time to set the record straight, sharing the true history and culture of Korea while raising the national brand. Let's get started with Get Korea Right. Are you ready to join?
When did it all begin? The beginning of joy embedded in daily life, where steps of learning meet a bigger world, and history coexists. The legend continues. Innovative technologies come together to unfold a new future, building a better tomorrow. A joy accessible to all, always present in your daily life. JDC.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. North Korea has launched another ballistic missile toward the East Sea just 6 days after its previous launch and only days before South Korea and the U.S. begin their annual Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise. Now, this year's drills carry added significance, with part of the assessment for the transfer of the Wartime Operational Control, or OPCON, set to take place. Now, all this comes as Pyongyang deepens military ties with Russia, steps up criticism of Japan, but appears more restrained when it comes to Washington. So what does this North Korea's signaling from its latest moves, and how should Seoul and Washington navigate the changing security landscape? For answers to this, we're joined in the studio by Ko Myung-hyun, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. Very big welcome.
Good to see you.
And also joining us online is Joel Atkinson, professor at the Graduate School of International and Area Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good to see you, Professor.
Yeah, good evening.
So let's start the discussion first with Professor Atkinson, with the latest, of course. So North Korea has launched another missile today, following the one in August 6th. So with Ulchi Freedom Shield also set to start on August 17th, what do you think of the timing of this?
Well, I think it's possible, even likely, that the test had already been scheduled before the Ulchi Freedom Shield announcement. There's been apparently something like 11 ballistic missile tests this year, so they're quite routine, though it sounds like this one may have been a new hypersonic type. So perhaps it's meant to send a signal regarding the exercise, but it's not like it's a secret that Pyongyang doesn't like these exercises, nor that it has missiles, so who knows?
So it could be pre-scheduled ahead of this latest announcement. Now, today's launch, one thing to note is that it came from the same area as the previous launch. Dr. Go, do you think North Korea could be testing or upgrading the same type of missile?
Well, that's a distinct possibility, in the sense that the area where the missile was launched was around Wonsan area. It's the same area where the earlier test has taken place. Even though in the earlier test, South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff didn't really share the details, such as the range, trajectory, and obviously the type of the missile. But then we are allowed to speculate, and we see certain patterns in the North Korean behavior. And for instance, the timing of the test, last time was the evening, this time was early in the morning. So I think this possibly indicates that North Koreans are essentially testing the missiles for performance, essentially to complete, I would say, technical development. And but then we can also infer from the trajectory as well as the range of the latest test that because it's around 700 kilometers, and there are only a handful of missiles in the North Korean missile arsenal that fits that detail, and that's the KN-23. And KN-23 is the North Korean version of the Russian Iskander short-range ballistic missile, which is very capable, despite short range, in the sense that it's able to evade missile defense systems. And so it is possible that North Koreans are testing a new variant, and given that North Koreans are developing their nuclear-powered submarine, which the North Koreans claim is capable of carrying a ballistic missile, it's possible that North Koreans are testing a submarine ballistic missile launch-capable variant of a KN-23, as well as an export version of a KN-23 that the Russians have probably purchased from the North Koreans and at the moment using against Ukraine. So in a nutshell, I agree with Professor Atkinson that this is less about messaging in Washington for dialogue or threatening South Korea. It's probably focused on the technical development as well as quality control.
Right, so more on testing their capabilities. Now let's also talk about the Ulchi Freedom Shield itself, Dr. Go. So this year the assessment is all the more important because of the OPCON transfer it will take place. What does this exercise actually mean for this process?
Well, so Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise takes place every year, so in that sense, there's nothing unusual about it. But what also you have indicated, the importance of the joint military drills this year is that this, in fact, forms part of the very important process in carrying out the OPCON transfer. So there are three phases to the OPCON transfer process. So first one is called the initial operational capability, so IOC, and this was already been completed back in 2019. So South Korea passed that phase. But this year is probably one of the most important phases called the full operational capability testing. And for that, you need to have not just combined, say like a policy planning, but also South Korean forces should be able to demonstrate that a 4-star Korean general is capable of leading like a combined forces with the United States. And a very important part of the process is the actual field exercises, and Ulchi Freedom Shield forms part of the very important field exercise. And so one of the key questions that observers have about this year's UFS is whether the South Korean forces as well as the US forces are working with an eye on completing the full operational capability testing. So whether this is true or not, and there hasn't been a mention of this officially. So maybe it is not, I mean, maybe this is an internal issue that there's no need to be shared with public. But nonetheless, so the significance of this year's Ulchi Freedom Shield is that this is going to be a very important part of the full operational capability evaluation of the OPCON transfer process.
A very important point we are indeed. Now, once this OPCON is actually transferred, South Korea will take the lead in the future Combined Forces Command. So from the U.S. perspective, Professor Atkinson, what are the benefits and the potential concerns for the alliance?
Yeah, so for the U.S., the main benefit would be that A, the alliance is put on a sustainable path in terms of Korean domestic politics, and B, that Korea provides more resources to generating and sustaining those joint force capabilities. So that could mean more capabilities overall, or it could mean that the US can then reduce the share of its resources directed towards North Korea in order to focus on other priorities. There are also concerns, many of which are quite kind of complicated to get into, but at the risk of oversimplifying things, I would say Washington's main concern is that Seoul may not want what it wants. If the US and Korea have different goals, it doesn't matter if their combined resources have gone up, because they're not really combined in the sense of working together. The US doesn't want to be Korea's insurance policy or leverage as Seoul tries to improve relations with Pyongyang and with China and Russia. It wants Korea to shoulder more of the burden of deterrence against all three, and for the alliance to provide leverage for Washington as it seeks to stabilize its relations with those powers.
Right, so it could definitely bring some changes to the alliance itself. But before this actually happens, Dr. Go, like Professor Atkinson has mentioned, there are also concerns. So what kind of certain conditions do you think would be necessarily met, and how close is South Korea to meeting them? So the
OPCON transfer is, I mean, if you just look at the overall shape of it, is about the command capability of the South Korean forces, whether South Korean force general will be able to command the combined forces of South Korea and the United States in the form of the future combined forces command. So this is the reason why we have the initial operational capability assessment, followed by the full operational capability assessment, and finally we are going, after we certified the FOC, or full operational capability assessment, then there's a final hurdle called the full mission capability assessment. So this year, as we mentioned before, it's going to be a pivotal moment in the timeline because the South Korean government had prepared or planned for the forces, South Korean forces to pass the full operational capability assessment this year in 2026. So that's one, so the command capacity is going to be the one of the key conditions. But then there are contextual conditions that are added to this. So in addition to the command capability about IOC, FOC, FMC, in addition to that, we have the military capability. So one of the second condition, the very important condition, is whether the South Korean forces are capable have a long-range strike capability, as well as the air defense capability against North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. So this is about capability, so it means that South Korea will have to, most importantly, acquire independent intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance system, which would require South Korea to deploy assets in the space domain. So essentially, spy satellites, as well as other remote sensors. This takes time, it's very costly, and South Korea and the United States are jointly planning to deploy more assets, ISR assets in the future, but that's going to take several years. So, but then it's all about investment, and South Korea is willing to spend up to 3.5% of GDP in augmenting its capabilities. So there's less doubt about the success of this phase or completion of this condition. The last and perhaps the most important condition is whether the security environment in the region is conducive to OPCON transfer. So what it means by this is that whether the security environment in Northeast Asia is more or less stable for South Korea, for the United States to transfer back the wartime operational control of the South Korean forces. And this is probably one of the most important critical points at the moment. We know that the North Korea's nuclear threat is actually growing rather than being reduced. Also, China is acquiring more of a threatening military posture, not in Northeast Asia, but then in Southeast Asia and over Taiwan. And this is something that the United States is very concerned about. And there's also the growing alignment between China, Russia, and North Korea. So, and this, I mean, whether this condition is still could be considered to be stable enough for South Korean forces to acquire back the operational control during wartime is debatable, in the sense that it would require a political decision. And this is still an open question, whether Washington and Seoul will agree on this, whether the environment is stable enough. There's uncertainty about it, and I think this is something that the leadership in both countries will have to discuss more in the future.
Right. We will have to see some progress in terms of capabilities and environmental situations as well. Then what about the timeline? Professor Atkinson, Seoul says it could be decided at the Security Consultative meeting later this year. Do you think the two sides agree on a specific year, or might Washington want further verification on that?
Well, Dr. Go can correct me if I'm reading too much into this, but as he stressed, the command the command capability, demonstrated command capability is very important. And I think the fact that the US decided that the Korean deputy commander of the Combined Forces Command would not take on the role of overall commander for this Ulchi exercise means the US as an institution probably decided that it would not be signing off on the conditions benchmark this year. It's difficult to say that conditions for wartime control have been met when conditions for a much simpler task, control of a major annual combined exercise, have not been demonstrated. So the language from both sides is couched in terms of conditions, but there's a lot of subjectivity around those conditions and when they're met. And as Dr. Go said, you know, this is for the leaders to discuss. The decision is fundamentally political. Perhaps the Lee Jae-myung administration still hopes to maybe go over the heads of US forces, Korea, and the War Department to President Trump himself. But with all his other problems drawing his attention, I can't really see him making OPCON transfer a special and urgent priority of his. So we'll see. But I wouldn't be surprised if the US side continues to be unwilling to set a date.
So there's still maybe some hurdles and uncertainties before the timeline gets set. But What about North Korea? It has also stepped up its criticism of Japan, including over its defense white paper and a possible review of its 3 non-nuclear principles. Why do you think Pyongyang is focusing so heavily on Japan right now?
Well, I think at its most basic, Japan is increasing its military capabilities, its military potency, and North Korea doesn't like that. It wants to reduce the international and domestic, inside Japan, the domestic legitimacy of that, and set out the parameters of what a stable relationship with North Korea would require from the other side. So you mentioned the white paper. It would require a certain type of white paper from Japan if they want to have friendly relations with North Korea. But it also seems to me likely that North Korea has agreed with China to do more coordinated messaging. North Korea has been saying things about Taiwan, for example, and China has been pushing its own very similar narrative on Japan and pushing it very hard as well.
So Japan certainly seems to be getting more attention. But what about Washington? Dr. Go, why do you think North Korea is kind of being more cautious or calculating when it comes to its stance on Washington?
Oh, it's always a rational behavior on the part of North Korea. North Korea is always engaged in this cost-benefit analysis of their behaviors, and clearly criticizing Japan is very cheap. So because Japan is yet to acquire a retaliatory capability against North Korea, whereas by criticizing Japan, North Korea scores points, not just with the domestic audience, which always has a very anti-Japanese stance, but also with China and Russia. So because Japanese investment in the military capability, it's not just about North Korea, it's about China as well. And North Korea, by taking the lead in criticizing Japan, it scores scores points with China, obviously. But having said that, I think North Korea is being careful about criticizing the United States, partly because there are other options to criticize U.S. policy without criticizing President Trump. And that also clearly indicates that North Korea is essentially keeping one of the options open, which is to eventually sitting down with President Trump to determine the final status of North Korea as a nuclear state. It clearly shows that despite all the indications that President Trump is distracted by other more important, I guess, challenges that he's facing right now, that North Korea still has hope that President Trump might put his attention again on the Korean Peninsula and have a repeat of the Singapore summit, even though North Korea has also indicated that they are not going to go down and sit down with President Trump for negotiations again, because last time they got seriously affronted by President Trump. So clearly shows that the North Korea is hesitant. And then I think President Trump is also reading this is an opportunity for him. So in that sense, there's a very mutually, I would say, reliant kind of a relationship here. So I think North Korea will always have this option open. And I think this behavior is going to continue until it's very clear that President Trump has either lost interest in North Korea or has no longer the political capital or time to focus again his attention in North Korea.
So eventually the key question would be whether there would be room for engagement between the two. So lately a bill to facilitate humanitarian aid to North Korea has been reintroduced in the United States Senate after more than 5 years. Professor Atkinson, do you think this could open a new channel for U.S.-North Korea engagement?
Yes, so the Democratic Senator for Massachusetts, Edward Markey, reintroduced the Enhancing North Korea Humanitarian Assistance Act. I don't think that action in of itself presents a new opening for U.S.-North Korea engagement. There's a big difference between introducing a bill and having that bill become law, and it wouldn't change much even if it does pass. But Senator Markey is part of a broader U.S. constituency for more engagement with Pyongyang. People like Victor Cha at CSIS, he's been kind of calling for that as well. But keep in mind that President Trump himself is already pro-engagement, so to speak. And as we've just heard, the North Korean side is also in some ways kind of leaving the door open, not wanting to alienate Trump. But still, engagement. It hasn't been enough to make any kind of real engagement happen. So fundamentally, at least, up to this point, as far as we know, the two sides are still too far apart in terms of what they want from each other to allow any kind of a real US-North Korea détente.
So it will be interesting to see whether that could create any room for further dialogue in the future. But meanwhile, North Korea-Russia ties, it's really getting closer and deepening by day. So, and there's also possibility for additional troop and missile deployments as well. Do you think this means that South Korea-US-Japan deterrence should also kind of change, evolve?
Well, I think we still have to be cautious about this report that North Korea might be about to send up to 50,000 soldiers to Russia, because there are many constraints about such a deployment now, because the last time North Korea sent its soldiers to Russia, it was in the function of the mutual defense treaty that Russia had signed with North Korea, and the most of the combat between North Korea and the Ukrainian forces took place within the borders of Russia, because Ukraine had invaded a certain region called Russian region called the Kursk, and in a way the argument for North Korea deployment was that North Korea is helping Russia defend its own territory. The next phase of a North Korean deployment will necessarily involve North Korea invading the Ukrainian territory proper, and that represents a major escalation of conflict by North Korea against not just Ukraine, but also against Europe. So such a massive deployment of North Korean soldiers will represent essentially an invasion of Europe by North Korea. And it's going to have huge ramifications, not just for the Europeans, but obviously in East Asia, because this shows that the security threats in Europe is tied to a security threat in East Asia. And this argument has been being pushed for by the Europeans for all this time. But then now that the argument is going to carry even more weight. So I think the South Korean government will be forced to respond to these new threats, not just because North Koreans might acquire more capability through combat experiences, and also from Russia's poorly paying for North Korean deployment in terms in the form of a technology transfer, maybe with the weapon systems, but because we have a security alliance and a relationship with our European partners. So I think South Korea will have to essentially have a different posture, not just vis-a-vis North Korea, but also vis-a-vis Russia. I think South Korea had been standing on the sidelines of the Ukrainian conflict, but now South Korea will be forced to, or compelled to assume more proactive choice. I think it's about time for South Korea to raise its posture on this issue, for instance, by expanding its military assistance to Ukraine, as well as expanding its military cooperation and other general security cooperation with the NATO members.
So further deployment could have far more ramifications.
Exactly.
And we'll have to see how Seoul would adapt their strategy on this going forward. Now, this is where we'll have to leave our discussion tonight. Thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Go.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And of course, Professor Atkinson as well. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.